Well, top of the morning to you. This is our Tuesday Key Market Drivers Call. It's October 8th. You see our contact info on the screen. We would, as always, love to hear from you. Let's get after it here this morning. We got several things to talk about. We have WASDE coming up here at the end of the week. I think it's on Friday, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's out on Friday. We'll show you the trade estimates. This is the, I guess, third installment of the USDA's process that they use at harvest time to figure out what is it, how big is it, how much do we have out there in the fields. And we'll show you the average trade estimates, but the executive summary version is trade isn't looking for really any significant changes at all to the size of the corn and bean crop. So they must think the USDA has it dialed in at this point. Not sure if that's a recipe for disaster or not, but I guess we will see. We got soybean harvest is rolling. Moving along on corn just fine too, pretty close to the 5-year average in last year's pace on corn harvest. But I think farmers, especially out here in the Western Corn Belt, are really trying to get these beans out of the field before they get any drier than they already are. I think, Nate, you're actually up doing some harvest work. What are you seeing out there besides dust?
Yeah, it's really dry. The beans are probably, 8.5% moisture. And, we talked a little bit before the call started about what is the impact, what impact does this have on the overall yield number? Because for those who don't know, bushels are calculated off of weight, not off of volume. So if the bean has less moisture in it, it weighs less. So then, what kind of impact is that going to have on yield? But yeah, I think you got to hurry up and get them out, because if you don't, they might just be powder here in about a week.
Yeah, or catch fire. It is.
Right.
It's very dry out here. I know where we're at here in the Omaha area. Really, in all of Nebraska, we've got. They got fire bans. They got everything else. They've even. I was even hearing on KFAB radio here. They're asking farmers, to the degree that it's possible, to not harvest, because apparently you get a piece of metal. Yeah, right. You get a piece of metal in there, you could throw a spark, and there's been several cases. I think one of the fires we got going out here in central Nebraska right now, they believe came off a spark off of a combine. So, yeah, we are approaching the halfway mark here on soybean harvest. And as I'll show you here in a minute, that's way, way, way out ahead of normal. Got another hurricane in Florida. Unlike the last one, this one doesn't seem to be really any threat from an ag perspective. It looks to be a monstrous hurricane, a monstrous storm here that's going to cut. You're not good for oranges. Not going to be a corn and bean issue, but not going to be a good oranges issue, not going to be a good people issue. So,
well, apparently there is a slight ag impact. I was reading last night, some of the largest phosphorus mines in the U.S. are in Florida.
Really?
Phosphorus facilities. I don't know if it's mine or facility, something phosphorus production related. I kind of just read the headline.
Or phosphate.
But yeah, for phosphate. And so they're worried about, what kind of impact that could have on fertilizer here this fall or going into next spring. But I guess we'll have to just kind of wait and see. It does look like a big one, though.
Yeah, it does. I think it's a Cat 4 or 5. Yeah, Cat 4 or 5 as we speak. I think it's supposed to weaken a little bit before it makes landfall, but pray for the people that are kind of in the way of that. I got a niece down there that just got out yesterday and came back to her folks' house back in the St. Louis area. So not good.
I talked to a mutual friend of ours who lives in the Tampa area and grew up in the Midwest, who I will not name. And I asked him if they were going to evacuate. He said, we live on an upper floor. I don't think it's going to be that bad. I texted him back last night. I said, are you holding with that story? He goes, no. He said, they're sounding like this one might actually be something we need to pay attention to. But yeah, I think for those of us from the Midwest, I think it's hard to get our mind wrapped around exactly. This isn't like a little tornado,
Well, I mean, tornadoes do a lot of damage in a very, very small area. We saw that here back in May. I mean, they absolutely destroy everything in their path. But, as we saw, I live, as the crow flies, 2 miles from the office. Scott's kind of almost in between there. And we had a very big tornado, went right in between all of it and didn't do any damage to the office or the house. Destroyed everything in that 150 or 200 yard wide path. So these things do a lot of damage across a wide area. So again, prayers for everybody in the path of, Milton?
Yep.
That's what they're calling this.
Also going to talk a bit, and we'll show you the spec is buying again. I guess again's not the right word. I think still is probably more appropriate. But as we'll show you when we get to that particular slide, I guess the bad news is the spec has been buying their short positions back in. The good news is they seem to be back to even, and this is kind of a time of the year that you wouldn't expect them to keep at it. Sitting with not many chips on the table at this time of the year would be more the norm. So I guess we'll see. We talked about harvest. We'll talk a bit more about that when we get into the deck a little bit further. We had our jobs reports. We don't normally talk a whole lot about the economic stuff, but it does have certainly impact on the value of the dollar because it has impact on what the Fed might do. And had, I think, for a lot of people, a surprisingly good jobs report. We got the JOLTS report earlier in the week. 8 million jobs were open in August, below the historic high, but not a bad reading. But I think when we got the actual unemployment data or the jobs data on Friday last week, that was the big shocker. 254,000 non-farm payrolls, way ahead of what was expected, and they adjust the prior 2 months up quite a bit. So I think there's a lot of discussion as does this cause the Fed to maybe change course a little bit. I think the market was we got the 50 basis point cut. The market was looking for about another 50 points over the course of the meetings for the rest of calendar 2024. And I think there's a lot of people that are starting to say, geez, I wonder if the Fed kind of lifts their foot out of the throttle a little bit. Maybe we'll get no more rate cuts or maybe only one. So
the Fed funds futures, I meant to put that in there on that bullet, but it's trading around 85% chance of only 25 basis points.
Okay, so the market's kind of adjusted to that. And that certainly, again, has implications for the value of the dollar. And you know what? I might make the dollar a little bit stronger. That may weaken markets up a little bit as well. Got the port strike. That lasted about 2 days. Tentative agreement was reached. They kind of looked like they split the difference here on the wage increases. I think the big sticking point right now is the whole no automation thing. We'll see where that goes. It's hard to believe that you could actually, in the modern era, compete with other countries around the globe that actually have nearly fully automated ports. If you can actually compete with that, if you can compete with those type of ports, but
Dave, that would be like, and again, not to get political, but that would be like when Henry Ford, started building the Model T. If they said, yeah, we're not going to automate this assembly line, we're going to keep building them all by hand. I mean, at some point, how can you, to your point, how can you even think you're going to compete?
You can't compete if you're still paying the average worker, up almost six figures.
Well, I think it's more with these guys. It's way more than almost. I think it is solid six figures. So.
Well, yeah, it's almost six figures today, and now it's 62% raise over 6 years.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes. At least we've kicked the can down the road to the middle of January. So we shall see. We'll get past the Christmas season. So we don't need as many TVs in January. Plus the election will be in the rear view. Talked about the WASD. Matter of fact, I think that's maybe the next slide here. And you could see, again, probably don't want to spend a whole lot of time up here. This is what the trade is expecting. This is what the USDA told us in the September report. So really not looking for any significant changes to corn or soybeans. Matter of fact, soybeans are identical to what the USDA gave us last month. This is supposed to say ending stocks down here, but you can see the trade is not looking for a lot of changes here. A bit lower corn number. That's simply because that we talked, I think, a week ago about that SEP1 ending stocks report that we got at the end of last month when we talked about it on last week's call. So fewer bushels of corn sitting around at the end of last year. So we'll reduce that beginning inventory. Therefore, by reducing the ending stocks here is what the trade is expecting. So not really what I would call earth-shattering expectations there. What's going on with the markets? Well, corn's not doing much. It was up a little bit last week. We're going to show you that beans were down quite a bit last week. And you may say, well, that's odd for corn to go up and beans to go down. Well, not really when you consider last week's report that we had. Remember how much beans were up the prior week and we were all scratching our head? Well, sometimes in the commodity market, what goes up must come down. And I think you see corn pretty solidly in this range that it's been in now for, I don't know, really quite a while. I think we have a market that seems to run out of upward momentum, 435, 440. We talked about that 385 low. And I think we're maybe settling out sideways. I think the spec does not have big bets, so we maybe have bled some of that volatility out of the market. And maybe for a lot of these commodities, corn, beans, soybean oil, wheat, maybe we kind of go sideways for a bit, I think would be my best expectation. You see harvest progress there. We got 30% of the corn harvested, about where we were last year at this time, and a few ticks ahead of the 5-year average, but no great shakes there. So that is what's going on in the corn market. Scott, what's going on the wheat side of things?
Well, to
Besides
continue
Russia shooting at stuff.
that's true. That's true. But to kind of continue your theme, you can see definitely you can see that kind of range bound pricing for in wheat. I mean, we poked our head back up a little bit a week ago in Chicago, up over the 610 mark, but it really hasn't gotten way out over its skis. Where we were back in July, May, June, or so. We were $7.50 back at the end of May. So we've come a long ways down the hill. We bottomed out just like we did in corn, back there in late August. Are we going to be able to get back down to 530 again in Chicago? I don't know. My guess is we're kind of probably a 550 or 60 to $6 type market here moving forward. So
ground starts getting solid at 550 and below, and we start banging our head on anything starts with a 6. Is that kind of where we're at?
Yep. And international prices haven't moved. You can see, despite the continuation of the war in Ukraine, those prices just don't move, and they really haven't. And there have been a couple of boats hit here in the last week or 10 days, and it's just not moving the needle. So back here domestically, we're getting planted right on schedule. We're 51% planted on winter wheat versus a 52 average. Emergence is right on average, 25% versus 25 on average. But the West, which is primarily hard red winter wheat, we need some rain. We're going to need some rain. We've been talking about how dry it is for harvest. Well, guess what? It's really hard to get something to grow when you're putting it in dust too.
Paige, you going to show us any rain for hard red winter wheat, guys?
No.
No, I didn't think
Sorry.
so.
I thought it was a short answer.
Yeah. Again, continuing a different theme, it's dry in other places too. It's still dry in Russia. It's dry in Australia. A-Bears came out and they have now pegged the crop in Australia at 31.8, but nobody else, well, I shouldn't say nobody, not too many other people are that big. Uncle Sam's got a 32 on their WASD, but that's just because, the A-Bears is at 31.8. Most everybody else is probably 30 million or less. So that's something that we're going to be keeping an eye on for the world fundamentals going forward. But otherwise, that kind of wraps it up for wheat.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Moving ahead into the soy complex, there's a pretty good drop, but again, 28 cents, a little over 2.5% on soybeans. That's coming off of a big 5+% move higher the week before. And again, I think the range bound story here seems to be pretty compelling as well. I mean, we had that 955 low back middle of August. I still am doubtful that can hold us longer term, but boy, so far we're hanging in there. We seem to get up around 10.5 bucks. And we kind of run into some difficulties moving a whole lot higher than that, especially with the pace of harvest there. You could see that we've got almost half the U.S. soybean crop out. That is 10 full percentage points ahead of last year and 13 percentage points ahead of the 5-year average. And I think farmers are just scrambling right now. They're letting the corn sit and they're just going after soybeans. So What's going on in South America? Well, Brazil's having trouble exporting from some of their ports. We've got water levels on the Amazon ports in the north at levels that we've not seen in generations. It's not stalling exports, but it's slowing them. Now, this is the time of the year where the U.S. typically takes over a lot of the export markets, so they've probably got less work to do. But you can kind of get the idea here how dry it is in Brazil. Good news, I think Paige will talk about a little bit. Looks like maybe we got some rain coming, but very dry down there as farmers try to get their crops planted. I put that third bullet in there. I thought that was a little bit odd. Read an article about that yesterday. ADM in Des Moines is going to close. I think that's their only crush plant in the state. It's about 12% of Iowa crush. They're going to close that plant, but from middle of October all the way through the month of November. Nate, weren't you hearing that is scheduled? I guess Nate had to hop off, but I think we're hearing that apparently was scheduled, but it seems like an odd time of the year for crush plant downtime. Why is that important? Well, we've been talking about this meal market. We talked about how the very low August crush affected it. We talked about how hurricane taking some plants down has kept the meal market tight. This is another potential development here that may keep this meal market a bit tighter than we thought, a bit longer than any of us thought. So not really a whole lot else going on in the soy complex that I haven't talked about already. Here's a good map of Brazil's planting progress. You can see up here in Mato Grosso, they're just starting to get rolling. But I think with the rains that look like they're coming in here, we ought to start to see, this is kind of the time of the year, as you can see on the right-hand side here, where we should start to see things kick into gear pretty quick with the Brazilian farmer getting these beans planted. When it comes to the vegetable market, I mean, the palm oil market just continues to defy gravity. You can see here we're more than $70. Palm oil is more than $70 a ton, more expensive than world soybean oil prices. That's not boding well for exports. We have a Malaysian Palm Oil Board report for the month of September is going to come out, I think on Thursday of this week, the 10th. I'll show you market expectations in a second. But before I get to that, harvest is rolling along, and we continue to hear good things. I think the U.S. crop almost out of the fields at this point, from what we are hearing, almost certain to be a record. I think U.S. farmers planted a record amount of canola seed this year. We have yields that are probably, if not a record, going to be pretty doggone close to it. So probably a record U.S. crop. Certainly the Canadian crop is much, much larger, 8 or 9 times the size of the U.S. crop. And that crop is still, we are hearing, probably 20 million metric ton crop. So we're coming down the home stretch there as well. Here's your Stabro estimate, looking for a pretty good bump in stocks. The Reuters survey trade estimates for this Thursday's report, also looking for a bump in stocks. And to give you some perspective, just under 2 million metric tons of inventory at the end of September in Malaysia is what's expected. 2 million metric tons has kind of always been the Mendoza line between, normal stocks and too much. The further you get above 2 million metric tons, the more burdensome inventories seem to be. And you can see from the export line there, as you would expect with prices this high, exports are not doing that well. This is not a correct number over here. That's not going to be up 23%. But regardless, you kind of get the idea here that we are running this palm oil market. I did read another Oil World article this morning, and one of their senior analysts there, David Mielke, who I assume is related to Thomas Mielke, the founder, they are saying that if Indonesia is able to accomplish this B40 mandate in 2025, that could be catastrophically bullish. Seems a bit dramatic to me, but I guess we shall see. At this point, we seem to have enough inventories, certainly in Malaysia anyway. So,
Dave, quick question on that.
Yeah.
Does that B40, is it currently in the legislation that I mean, they're going to do it on Jan 1?
Well, they're not going to go to B40. They are going to move to B40 and hope to be there by sometime late next year.
Okay. And the whole
Hope
B50 thing is not until 26.
the B50 thing, it was more of a political advertisement.
Right.
At this point, it's, more is better. If B40 is good, then B50's got to be better. At this point, I'm not sure what the feasibility is. And I've always contended that, at some point, this becomes not feasible financially for the government. The Indonesian government, the majority of their revenue, or a large share of their government revenue, comes from exports. And the whole theory here is we keep pushing up export taxes for the export palm oil out of Indonesia to pay for the subsidies to make it economical to blend the biofuel back into the diesel fuel stream. Well, remember, we use a hell of a lot more diesel fuel than we make veg oil on this planet, and it's not close. It's dozens of times as much. And so at some point, you continue to push this, you will start to get the price of veg oil so much more expensive than its petroleum counterpart that it becomes completely uneconomical. So I guess we'll have to see where this goes, but I've had some people tell me that there's no way that they don't have the infrastructure to get to B40, much less B50 later. And I think we'll have to remain. It's just going to remain to be seen. But that's a continuation of the bullish palm oil story. So what's going on in the dairy markets here, Jay?
Well, the biggest thing we've got going on in the dairy complex right now, we got a products report that came out. The USDA products report came out last Friday. Kind of more of the same. There wasn't anything. I wouldn't call the report bullish. I wouldn't call it bearish. On the cheese front, on the products report, cheddar cheese production's lower year over year, which has been that way all year. Total cheese production's actually up. So if you look at Mott's and some of the other cheeses like cream cheese and stuff, it is doing very well. But the market's responded, and responded in cheese and in butter by going down, and going down significantly. Like
Right.
on cheese, on Friday, we closed below $2. We're at about $1.95. We closed the same there on Monday. On the butter front, that market's been getting softer and softer this whole entire time, and with the forward curve coming down also at the same time. So on butter, we're about 270, 271 on the spot. Forward curve about 285. So the way I would characterize right now the whole entire dairy complex, milk production picking up seasonally. The basis popped a little bit, but that's more of a local thing than anything else going on for some of the logistical issues. But when you look at dairy as a whole, milk's starting to pick up seasonally, a little bit more production. We've got more cheese coming at us. We've definitely got more butter coming at us, and we've had that all year. And I think the market really reflects the buyers sitting back and going, hey, I've got coverage, I'm good. I think if you're a processor, you're looking at it, I think we've got more than enough cheese, more than enough butter. So I think this market really reflects when this is a time when you look at the dairy complex and when buyers stop chasing markets and kind of let things play themselves out, we get markets that kind of relax and are starting to come down to what I would think is more reasonable numbers based on what the fundamentals are showing us right now. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, we've had big butter markets well over $3 here. This is like the third year in a row. And,
yeah,
I remember you all summer had been saying, hey, the market remembers the last dog that bit it. Buyers
yeah,
remember the last dog that bit them. That's been $3 butter. We've blown butter budgets up. And people maybe came to the market, panicked, came in when it was too expensive. But the other side of that maybe we're seeing right now, and that is where the buyers. Well, the buyers are already covered.
yeah.
And I think maybe that's what's going on.
Yeah, I think the bids are light in cheese and in butter for that matter of fact. So the cheese market's still inverted. On the butter market, we're in a carry market and have been for some time now, but the cheese market's been inverted. That's starting to come down too. So we'll see how this plays out going forward. But I think maybe we enter a period going into Q4 here that maybe that's as I said before, a little bit more reasonable, a little less volatility going forward, but we'll see.
Well, we're talking about that in the grains and oilseeds too. I wonder if maybe we aren't. I hate to even say this out loud because then something else will
Right.
blow up. But I wonder
Yeah.
if we're not heading back into a period of more I would say normal markets. I mean, we have, in a lot of these markets, we have seen so much volatility in the last 3 years that I think our brains tell us that that is the norm.
Yeah.
And it really isn't. It really isn't. Most of these ag commodities have annual volatilities in the 21, 22, 23% range.
Yeah.
We've just seen some ranges here. I think we had the most volatile year. I don't know if it's across all commodities. Wouldn't surprise me if it was 2 years ago. I know it was in a lot of the grains and oilseeds that we watch. So,
Yep.
all right,
No
Jay.
doubt.
Well, thank you for that. Let me show you real quick spec positions. Looky here. Another big week in soybean oil. I told you on last week's call, I thought the spec would be back to even. They were about 3.2% of open interest on the short side on last week's report. Well, they got a little bit on the long side, 2.7%. We get asked the question all the time, are they going to get long? Is now the time they're going to keep buying and they're going to get long? I don't know what they're going to do. You can never know, but I will say this. This is not the time of the year that it is very common to see a big campaign by the spec. I mean, if you have a market that's moving higher, certainly they're going to continue to chase it higher. But I think we've seen soybean oil prices kind of stall out here. We have certainly, at least for now, seen petroleum prices stall out. We got, I think WTI and Brent crude prices got up over $80. I think that drug bean oil close to the top of that recent range. But we weren't able to break out. Petroleum's back in the mid 70s here now. So I just think it might be a market that, you can see the spec does not have a lot of money bet across any of these markets to speak of. Now, canola doesn't, that's not a huge market. Oats is not a big market at all, so we're not going to count those. But commodity casino is not very active right now, and I think history would tell us not likely to be. So what do you got for us on the weather front, Paige?
Yeah, a lot of, as far as U.S. weather goes, you guys kind of covered a lot of it, a lot of the main points. As Scott pointed out, there's not a whole lot of love coming for wheat country there, and it looks like things are not looking great as far as drought conditions go. You can see how much that, this is corn area and drought, but you can see how much that has changed. Luckily, this map did not look like this during pollination or much of the growing season. We got some good rains throughout, but really, especially here in Nebraska, we haven't really gotten any sort of even significant rain in a couple months at this point.
Oh yeah, we had the driest September on record. We had 9/100ths of an inch of rain officially in the
Where
Omaha
was
area.
that?
Apparently at the airport. I think that's where they do the official measurement. But yeah, I don't remember it either.
I didn't
we
want to
haven't
say
had
we
a-
got no rain, but we got no rain.
Well,
The
9/100ths of an
last-
inch is almost no rain. So
Right.
Yeah, the last half inch that I can remember was late August.
Yep.
Like the middle or third week of August or something. So
Yeah. So as
maybe
we
next week we ought to put the wheat areas in drought. Maybe that ought to be the map.
Yeah, that might be a little bit better one, especially because, at this point, it doesn't really matter that corn area is in drought because we're harvesting. So, if anything, it's maybe a little bit good because harvest progress is able to roll right along. But yeah, not great for wheat country. You can see that 7-day forecast was white. The longer term forecast, again, I think we touched on this already. It's pretty much kind of what you're looking for when it comes to harvest weather. Above average temperatures, below average rainfall. Again, it's going to be warmer and drier. Farmers are having plenty of opportunity to get their crop out in a timely fashion. As Dave mentioned, it seems like they're kind of pulling ahead a little bit quicker on soybeans. With how dry it's been, that can actually cause a little bit of issues. Those bean pods might dry down a little bit too quick and potentially crack. And
More than a little. Yep.
Yeah, drop some beans on the ground. And once they're on the ground, farmers aren't really going to crawl around on their hands and knees and pick them up. So a little bit of rain on some of those soybean acres wouldn't be a bad thing, but unfortunately it does not look like that is kind of on the docket here. So we'll have to kind of keep an eye on that. If you want to flip over to South American weather, things are looking a little bit better down there.
Finally.
Do you want to back up one to that past 7-day map?
Yeah, there you go.
So this past 7-day accumulated rainfall map is looking a little bit better. Normally, a lot of those rains kind of northwest are staying up kind of outside of Brazil, and we've started to see this week them moving into Brazil. We'd like to see some more widespread across central Brazil. Southern Brazil keeps getting kind of hammered with rain, so I don't think they need any more rain at this point, but this map will be an interesting one to watch, especially as we're looking at the forecasts out forward, if you want to pop to those now. That 7-day forecast has a little bit more rain kind of in central Brazil, but really down into Argentina, they're supposed to get a pretty good drink. And then that 14-day forecast looks dang near ideal. Widespread rains across Brazil and down into Argentina. So I think we've said it the last week or two now. It looks like the rainy season is kind of picking up. Maybe on the tail end of, I don't think it's late necessarily, but it's kind of on the tail end of when we were hoping for it. And with how dry Brazil is, we could really kind of stand to have this ramp up here pretty quick.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you, Paige. Thank you for everybody that participated. And we certainly thank everybody for listening to this. There's our contact info. We would love to hear from you. And as always, be careful out there.